Revolutionizes audiobooks, George R. Martin is told to step down and hand his books to somebody else. And are we in an AI bubble? Find out all of this and a lot more in today's episode of Author Update. I'm Thomas Umstead Jr.
And I'm Jonathan Sugar Jr. And today I get to talk about something fun. AuthorMedia.social has come under attack.
Dun, dun,
The
dun.
scammers have found us. The bots are burrowing in through the foundations. And so we have countered their assault with fire and close combat. And we are ready to repulse. Thomas, what are we doing to repulse what's happening?
Yeah, so first let me explain what happened. AuthorMedia.social was not hacked. What happened was a bad actor, likely from Nigeria, came in and took advantage of a feature, which is on authormedia.social, which is a social network that I run for authors. You can send direct messages to other authors. And the whole point of this feature is to help foster friendships between authors and encourage collaboration. And a lot of people have found their new author friends on authormedia.social. Well, this Nigerian got on and thought it would be a good idea to message hundreds or maybe thousands of authors telling them that he was from Netflix and he wanted to make their book into a movie. And so for he started doing this first thing in the morning. I wake up and all my phone is messages from people saying that there's a bot, and I'm like frantically trying to figure out what's going on. And the problem with these kinds of bots is that we'll ban somebody and then they'll just sign up with a VPN and a different email address and pick up right where they left off. And so what I finally did was something that I was not planning to do, but I have now erected a big, beautiful paywall.
Build a wall. Build a wall.
So now, if you want to join authormedia.social, there's a one-time fee of $10. So it doesn't cover the cost of running authormedia.social. It's way more expensive than that. And there's still a lot of free ways in. So if you've already signed up, you don't have to pay. If you're a patron, you don't have to pay. If you're going through one of my courses, you don't have to pay. If you're going to the Novel Marketing Conference, you don't have to pay. But if you're some stranger on the internet, you now have to pay $10. And the purpose of this is to keep the bots out, because bots don't have access to money. And it's going to hopefully keep the scammers out. Because while the scammers can pay $10, they don't want to be identified. And because they're not really using their real name. Everything about them is a lie. But to get the credit card to go through, they have to actually use a valid credit card. And to use a stolen credit card is too much hassle. I really hope that we don't get there. So anyway, I just realized
that's a lot of work. It just feels like a lot of work.
In general, these scammers are haunting Facebook groups and Facebook pages. And one of the nice things about the software that I'm using is that I can erect a paywall. And what's interesting is that since I've erected the paywall, I've had more new people sign up than we had before, because people actually want to be in a bot-free environment. There's actually a real value in interacting with fellow human authors rather than a bunch of bots on Facebook. So that's why we did it. It cost me a lot of money to run authormedia.social, and this is not like a revenue making plan. In fact, at first I thought no one was going to sign up. We had our very first sign up, so I've made $10 so far on the paywall. But the thing is, it's just a one-time fee. So it's not, it's a cup of coffee or 2 cups of coffee if you're depending on where you live. So that's what happened. If somebody contacts you, and I will say this kind of attack is becoming more and more common. The Nigerians who were pretending to be princes and kind of targeting people generically are now targeting authors specifically. And there's a bunch of Nigerians who have a AI generated avatar that makes them look like you, however you look, and they'll try different versions to target different people, and they'll run all of their messages through some sort of AI tool to help with the language difference. Because normally authors would be protected from these kinds of scammers by the use of the English language. So authors tend to have really high standards for English. And if somebody's claiming to be an editor and they are getting really basic things wrong, it makes it look like maybe they don't know what they're talking about. But the reason why these kinds of scams work is because every author wants to get this email. They want somebody from Netflix to say, we're going to make you rich and famous.
As somebody who used to maliciously target people, you get people to come to you based on their hungers. Okay, what are they hungry for? What is it they really, really want the most? And for authors, that's ego and exposure. And if Netflix comes to you and says, "Hey, your book is amazing. We want to make it into a movie," you should be like, "Are you though?"
And shout out to our moderators. We had some moderators who jumped on this right away. And so if the scammers didn't attack you or didn't offer you a contract for your book on Netflix, it's not because the scammers didn't think your book was any good. It was because we'd kicked them out before they had a chance to get to your account. Some people are like, even the scammers aren't interested in my book. It's like, no, the scammers are very interested in your money. That's actually a good thing.
When the scammers start targeting you, you know you're starting to make it, okay? Just keep doing what you're doing. You're doing good. The scammers think you're worth something.
Yeah. So anyway, my recommendation, instead of paying the $10, is to become a patron for $4. And then you click the link. You'll get the patron badge. You'll get lifetime access to authormedia.social, and that's actually the cheapest way in. So the $10 paywall is not really meant to actually bring in money. It's just meant to keep the scammers out.
Right.
But as we're talking about AI and scammers using AI, there's a big question that's a big buzz right now. I'm hearing it in the political news. I'm hearing it in the AI news. Even Ben Shapiro was talking about this. And that is the question, are we in an AI bubble? Because the entire stock market right now is being propped up by AI. So the biggest growth in S&P 500 is NVIDIA, and the big reason that NVIDIA is growing is because of AI. And this has a big impact on authors because the economy overall impacts us, and AI is a tool that many authors use. And even if you're not using it, your competitors are using it. And the big question is this going to create a crash, or is this going to persist? So I'm going to very quickly give you the arguments for and against the AI bubble, and then we're going to hear what Jonathan thinks, because I don't actually know what Jonathan thinks. Other than he's against this topic overall. So let's give the arguments for a bubble first. So they are, all of the AI companies are losing money. So ChatGPT is losing money, or OpenAI, XAI, Anthropic. Even otherwise profitable companies like Google and Microsoft, their AI divisions are money losers for them. And so when you're using OpenAI or Grok, that query, that interaction that you're having with AI is being subsidized by venture capitalists. So it costs them more to give you the answer to your question of how many R's are in strawberry than you're paying. And obviously that's true with free users, but it's even true with the paid users. They're potentially losing money on the paid users. And the thinking was, oh, well, we're losing money now, but we'll make it up in volume. So as we have more customers, we'll get bigger and more efficient data centers. The cost for each token is going to go down and we'll get profitable. And so whoever gets the most market share now will win in the long run. And that seemed like really good advice. But the problem is the tokens aren't getting cheaper.
Right.
The models, especially now that they all have reasoning, are generating far more tokens than they ever were before. And nobody uses the cheap models. So you could still use older, cheaper models, but nobody wants to do that. They want to use the cutting edge models, and the cutting edge models are all getting more expensive on a per token basis. Most of them are getting more expensive on a per token basis, but they're all definitely generating more tokens. And this explains OpenAI's big pivot into GPT-5, which was only kind of an improvement around the edges, but really it was an improvement to try to reduce the number of tokens that OpenAI is having to generate, because it's not a money bandwidth. They just don't have the computers bandwidth.
Yeah.
Like they're really hitting up against a hard technical limit that the demand for AI tools, authors and programmers and kids, doing homework, is growing faster than their ability to plug in new computers and buy new computers from NVIDIA. And so some of these companies are trading at over 100 times their PE ratio, which for anybody who's like from the stock market, it's a big red flashing light that says warning, warning, warning.
It ain't going to stay this good forever.
So if their profits don't go way up, no company can survive a 100x PE ratio. So lots of hype, lots of fear of missing out. Those are telltale signs of a bubble. And some people are like, oh, Meta has freezed their hiring. They were spending $100 million to hire new people. Now they're not hiring anybody new. This argument I don't think is very valid because Meta kind of approached it like they're building out their new team. And now that they have their new team, they're not going to keep adding people to the team, which is actually smart because you need that team to have some time
Yeah.
to coalesce. You don't want to
Yeah.
constantly be adding people. But it does sound scary, right? They spent $1 billion hiring people and now they're not spending that money anymore. Is that a sign that the bubble's over? And the argument in general is this is 1999 all over again. It's another .com bubble. So that's the arguments in favor of the bubble. Now, here are the arguments against the bubble. And the biggest one is that people are spending money on AI. So it's not like the .com bubble because the .com bubble was companies that were not making any money, were hoping to make money somehow in the future,
Right.
and they had no plan to make money, but they'd figured it out eventually. And the VC money is like, you have to make money. You have to have a plan to make money. And so in that way, it is different. And I will say, OpenAI just had its first $1 billion month. So they may be losing money, but they brought in $1 billion, and that was mostly subscription revenue, which means next month they're going to make another billion and another billion. But they're actually growing. They had 20% growth just from June. So from June to July, just that 1 month, they went from 1 billion to 1.2 billion. That's massive growth. Like that's whole data centers every month's worth of growth. And it's real growth. It's people really are using AI more, and more people are using AI. And so part of it's because they're getting AI really cheap. And this is a big change authors need to be aware of. And part of the reason why it's good to use AI now, because this may be the golden age of AI when you can get a subscription for only $20. Because it may be next year an OpenAI subscription is $200 a month. And it really creates a kind of haves and have nots because not everyone can afford to use the AI models once the companies switch from growth to profitability. But right now, you can get the frontier models for very, very cheap, and that may not last forever. So, the other argument that it's not a bubble is that the revenue is climbing, so they are showing growth. So even though they're not profitable, the growth is growing and it's growing exponentially. XAI had like 1,000 times growth, or like their numbers kind of broke like charts. So Grok went from basically nothing last year to massively profitable, over I think 500 million users I heard. And that's just one of the many AI companies. So it's booming all across the market. And AI really does make people more productive, right? And an author using AI for marketing is going to be more productive at marketing and spend less time marketing and more time writing than an author who's doing everything themselves. And the technical limitations on compute are what's holding the industry back, not money. And some people would argue that the technical limitations are actually preventing the bubble from getting worse. I don't know if that's true. But the argument on this side is that this is like the social media bubbles. There's a famous song that came out in 2005 or 2006. It was, I'm not going to sing it because I have a rule against that and I don't want to get a copyright strike, but it's We Didn't Start the Fire, that song. But the lyrics were, here comes another bubble. And it was making fun of all these social media companies and making fun of Facebook for having a $20 billion valuation. Facebook makes like $20 billion a month now. So like it wasn't a bubble. Like Facebook really did deserve that $20 billion valuation. And if any of us would love to have gone back in time to 2005 and bought Facebook stock. So that bubble didn't end up being a bubble because there was real money that the social networks were making. In fact, the biggest problem with the social networks is that they were so popular and so profitable. It gave those social networks political power in addition to market power. So those are the arguments for and against. I'd be curious what y'all's thoughts are in the chat on the. I don't know about when the singularity is. Some people think we've already hit the singularity, and that's why all the hockey puck graphs are going up into the air. So what would a market correction look like if we are in a bubble? So the tools, when the bubble pops, expect prices for AI tools to get way more expensive and more limitations and restrictions, and especially the very best tools, the ones that give you the best edge, will be quite a bit more expensive. And a crash in AI will bring down the entire United States economy with it. Like the whole stock market's going to go down because all of these things trade, and AI is touching all these different industries. So like every industry is hoping that AI is going to be their path to growth, even if they're like agricultural products. Like every company, they're hoping it's going to be like the computer, right? Computer made every business more efficient, and the hope is that AI is going to be the same. And if it's not, it's going to be countrywide global layoffs. Definitely no more signing bonuses for $1 billion. And a lot of consolidation. Look for companies to get merged. Look for somebody to buy Anthropic. So it'll be an overall economic recession because everybody's hoping that AI will save us in this current economic reality. So that's kind of where things are as I see them. I'm not giving financial advice because never listen to economists predict the future because they're really bad at it.
There's a tactical outlook on this. In the military, you get really leery when your LT comes in and says, "Guys, we got new guns." Why do we have new guns? What's wrong with our old guns? Why don't the new guns work? And who made a ton of money selling them to you? Who was in the military? Okay, so we get really leery about new stuff. AI, the way it's behaving, and I'm just going to condense a lot of what Thomas already said because Thomas is right. AI right now is behaving like an invasion. Invasions are extremely expensive. They go in and they take territory. That's the point of the invasion. That's the value you're getting from it. So you're spending millions of dollars on equipment and personnel to go and take ground so you can hold the ground and get some value out of it or destroy a threat that's threatening your value. So that's what AI is doing right now. They're taking ground and trying to hold their ground. At a certain point, they had to convert to becoming profitable. And Thomas is right. The prices will go up, and what that will mean is it'll price out all the little people. Okay, so everyone who's now getting value out of AI are going to rely on it, and that's when markets can jack up their prices.
And I think like using it for work is probably always going to be profitable. Using it to make funny memes, may not be.
And if it's
profitable.
costing the AI company that much for people, I mean, if it's costing them $100 billion a year to make memes for people, what are you going to cut? Okay, you're going to put in a paywall to reduce your cost so that people are still going to be getting value out of your company, but you can stay profitable and stay in the black. Because we're talking power generation, we're talking compute problems, we're talking cooling issues. That's one of the major problems with the computers right now is they're getting too hot. And you can't put too many servers together in a room, otherwise it overheats the room and melts all the servers, which Helldivers is about to experience on the 26th.
So there's actually like a whole school of engineering on dealing with something called microclimate, which is all about like how do you cool a server farm because you have all these like hot spots and cool spots, and it ultimately ends up just being a matter of electricity and power. And northern regions actually have an economic advantage from southern regions because if it's 30 degrees outside or 0 degrees outside, if you're in centigrade, it's a lot cheaper to cool something than if it's in Arizona and it's already 100 degrees outside without even turning on the
Toronto,
computers.
you can just open the door. In Arizona, don't you ever open that door. We bury it 800 feet underground.
Yeah.
All right, so next story. Spotify is launching 6 new audiobook features, which is kind of exciting for authors, especially those of us that are working on our audio catalogs. First thing that they're doing is they're doing author pages. This will do an author's bio, a full catalog, which is really nice. New releases. So if a fan really likes what they're listening to, they can now search your name. They can click on your name from the audiobook, go to your author page and see what else you have to offer. Before that, it was actually harder to do.
And you want to check this right now. So if you're traditionally published, you should be on Spotify already. And so you want to make sure that your author page looks good, that it actually has your photo updated, that it actually has your bio on it, that it actually lists all of your books. This is one of those metadata issues that's really easy to overlook. If you're exclusive to Audible, none of these cool things Spotify's rolling out are going to help you. But if you're indie and wide as an audiobook, check your author page because you should be able to control it yourself. And that's just the first of the features.
And hubs are fantastic. Okay, you always want to look at generating hubs so that when somebody hits one of the branches of the hub and go back to the hub, you're just going to statistically make more money from hubs. Another thing they did is a sleep timer for audiobooks. So if you tend to go to sleep while listening to audiobooks, I don't do that, but if you do,
For
then
parents, this is a surprisingly
this is
nice
great.
feature.
Yeah. So my kids go to sleep listening to their audiobooks all the time. And so they they really need the sleep timer. It's like, man, I don't remember where I was on the book. So they added in the sleep time for audiobooks. Is a fantastic thing. Another one is video clips for exploring audiobooks. You can now do short videos to give a teaser before you commit to an audiobook. There's no this is back in 2024 when they announced this. Okay, there hasn't been a major rollout since then. It's something they're still talking about. It appears limited to titles and creators, but if it is something that they roll out, then you're gonna have that potential for that tool in the future,
they,
which would be
they
fantastic.
they do have a countdown page, which is a really unfortunate name for a page, which would have been called pre-order. But since you don't actually order a page, it functions like a pre-order page. But since they're not buying your book, they just get to subscribe to it. But again, you want to make sure that your book, if you're doing a pre-order window, that you have a countdown page, because during your launch, and especially during your pre-launch,
Exactly.
you can drive traffic to this countdown page, which will lead you to the final tip we're going to get to, which is the most important for boosting your audiobook sales, especially if you're trying to pivot away from Audible and they're just crushingly awful royalty arrangements.
There's so much news going on about Daniel Green is still going on about that. The playlist. Now there are audiobook playlists that you can get on, kind of like Goodreads with their lists. You can create or curate a to listen list or be discovered via editorial picks, which will categorize everything from favorites to new gems. This is available right now. And if you get your audiobook onto one of these lists, I mean, you got people who just want to be told what to listen to, right? They don't want to go looking for it themselves. They're just going to go to their list or to their playlist and, oh, yeah, that looks interesting, and click on that. And your percentage, your statistical likelihood of being selected from that list goes way up, especially given that Spotify is on a minute basis. So you're not stuck on the credit thing here. Now you're just competing for minutes.
If we take a note from Spotify marketing tips for musicians, which if you're
Right.
trying to make money on Audible, seeing what the musicians have figured out, what works and what doesn't work, there's a lot to learn here. And 80% of Spotify marketing tactics are all about getting featured on the right playlists. If you're
Yeah.
at this top spot on a popular playlist, you get a lot of guaranteed downloads, and the controllers of the top playlists end up being the hit makers. And there's a real opportunity here in the book world to start controlling the top playlists of the like top Christian fantasy books playlist, right? If nobody's created that in that micro genre and you control it, that's a huge position of authority, especially if you can get a lot of people using it and it becomes the most popular playlist. So whatever your micro genre is, consider creating a playlist for that micro genre and curating it yourself. So in order for the playlist to be popular, you have to do a good job curating books, which means you have to actually be well read in your genre, which a lot of authors are like, I don't need to be well read in my genre. It'll make me derivative. And they end up being accidentally derivative and they can't figure out why they don't have reviews because they don't know what readers want. It's like, just read the books in your genre. It's not that hard. It'll help you develop good taste. And it will help you with things like this, where you can curate playlists and maybe you can team up with some other authors to put together playlists. This is the first you're hearing about it, most likely, because nobody's talking about this, but this is so critical, and now's the time. You're going to start hearing about Spotify playlists 6 months from now. Everyone's going to be talking about it, and by then it's too late.
So
Once the case studies happen, it's going to be really too late for you to own the most powerful list in your micro genre.
Right. This is kind of mirroring the giveaway strategy where you get together with another author and you guys give away your books and you share the results of the email list that you got. If you can get together with another group of authors who are writing the same thing that you're writing and you all promote the same playlist on Spotify, again, I mean,
lists.
Yeah, to your email lists, or even social media would work to an extent, or if you can get on podcast episodes and promote it there. Because Spotify, a lot of people have Spotify Premium. I mean, and they can listen to audiobooks there. Even if they're not used to doing that, I mean, if they have Spotify Premium, then the audiobook is free. Like, you just say that, it's free on Spotify Premium. That's what I say. It's free to read on KU, right? So if you can do that and get together with another group of authors and do a cross promotion to
a curated playlist on Spotify, you can probably see some pretty good mileage come out of that.
Yeah. There's the final really cool feature that they're rolling out is something called follow along, which allows for visuals to appear on the screen at various points in the story. So, fantasy authors, come in close. It's time to talk. Your map, the one that you have beautifully laid out in your print book, and it looks great on your ebook. Listen. Use this here. And you can have more than one map. You can have a map for every chapter of your book. You have a battle, have a map for that battle. Your people exploring a city, have a map for that
It's
city.
almost like, is there a tool in the patron toolbox that does something like this?
I have a map making tool. It's the map maker. It costs me money every time you run this because the image tools are the most expensive, or some of the most expensive.
Pop that.
But whether you use
AI
my tool,
Thomas bubble.
AI Thomas is actually really expensive. I think he's more expensive than the image tools. Well, anyway. It's a conversation for another time. Thank you for being patrons, but these will never be free. I'll tell you that right now. But whether you use my tool or not, you probably already have a map. Use it here, and this is something I think could be fun for an author to use AI to like create character images, right? So when a character is talking, you see an image that you, the author, have generated of that character. Somebody else is talking. Like, you could play around with this. There's some innovation here and some experimentation here where it's still an auditory experience primarily, but you can augment it with images that change. And this really gives you an advantage over Audible, right? You're trying to get your Audible readers to switch to Spotify because you're making more money off of them on Spotify. You got to give them a reason to switch. And this kind of more multimedia experience could be that reason to switch as you pull them away. It's like,
right,
come with me. Audible's evil. They're taking all the money and they're not giving it to anybody. Spotify is a little more generous. It's a tiny bit.
Yeah,
they have better features.
This is a combined arms strategy to where you're I would say like negging Audible. You're trying to diminish the perception of them while also enticing people to another platform that could potentially give you more benefit, like higher royalties or more exposure or something like that. Because if people are locked into Audible, then they're going to stay there unless you can figure out a way. So this is now a good time if you want to try to move people to your Spotify or to your selling direct. I know a lot of people are selling direct now. This is a good time to do that by saying this is the shady, slimy stuff that Audible's doing in the background. Even if it's not shady or slimy, it's just being portrayed that way and you can take advantage of it.
This is the very best time for a competitor to pop up. And I actually have some news on that. But real quick, I want to answer Joel's question. He's asking if it's videos too or just images. To my knowledge, it's just images, but also songs, actually. So you can integrate if like the characters are listening to a Britney Spears song in the background, you can actually tag that Britney Spears song in the extra section, and you might even be able to get it to play in the background, or at least feature it so they could tap it and listen to it, which normally you could never do because Britney Spears is very copyrighted. But because it's all inside of the Spotify ecosystem, they have rights to all of the music, and so you can actually incorporate musical elements into your book in some really interesting ways. All of this is cutting edge. I don't have any case studies to be like, go look at author Joe Smith. He did this really well. But if you figure it out, let me know. There might be a novel marketing interview in it for you.
Yeah,
somebody
Thomas
likes our
sent me
audio
a
mix.
new mic. Yeah, Thomas sent me a new mic. It was his fault last week, but he sent me a new mic and it's performing much better. So everyone
audio
say thank you,
compression.
Thomas, for knowing audio.
It's all about audio compression. Okay, so great time to compete with Audible. What's the new thing coming around the bend? I just had earlier today a conversation with someone from 11 Labs, which is the leading AI text-to-speech company.
Right.
This is the company that did the Melania Trump audiobook. So Melania Trump, her English isn't very good. She didn't want an actress to read her autobiography, but she didn't want to read it herself. So they made a voice clone of her, and they then turned it into the audiobook. Well, 11 Labs is rolling out soon. And I believe I have permission to share this.
We gonna find out.
We'll find out. I didn't see no embargo. That they're going to have a new marketplace called 11 Reader, where you can just upload the text of your book and it turns it into an AI audiobook and allows you to sell it to your readers, and you keep 60% of the money, and they don't let anybody else have a bite at the apple. So from a cost to create an audiobook perspective, basically free, especially compared to working with an actual,
If you're exclusive.
if you're not exclusive to ACX. But like compared with working with a human, obviously 11 Labs is way, way cheaper. And 11 Labs allows you to actually put emotional cues. So you can say whisper and the AI will whisper. You can say laugh and, sorrowfully or sardonically. Like it takes surprisingly good stage direction, and you can tweak it, which is a lot easier. There's somebody on authormedia.social who needed like 20 changes to her audiobook, and her narrator is just not doing them. And she's like trying to figure out what to do because the narrators cost her this huge amount of money. So I'll be following the story. I'm going to be testing 11 Labs myself. This isn't a recommendation, but it is something to keep an eye on. And more competition for Audible is 100% better for the market. Even if you hate AI, and you hate 11 Labs, the fact that they're adding like another army to the board of Audible's market dominance, this is good for you because it's going to force Audible to treat you better. Because right now, they don't love you. They don't appreciate you.
Yeah. I didn't like Shia militants, but I liked how ISIS reacted to them, so we got along. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to like AI audiobooks, but
this is a record. Jonathan has not used the word Marine in 30 minutes, ladies and
I'm
gentlemen.
trying
He's alluded to
really
it.
hard. I'm trying really hard. And I didn't say Marine, okay? I talked about the enemy at that point, but I can talk about it if you want. All right, Thomas. So we're going to have a Q&A at the Novel Marketing Conference that probably a lot of this is going to be covering. About how many tickets do we have left for that? Is it still possible to get into the conference?
Yes. So the early bird ticket sales are still open. But if you're thinking about coming to the conference and you're thinking about getting a super ticket, so a super ticket's the most expensive ticket. It extends the 2-day conference to a 3-day conference. There's only 7 super tickets left. So if you want to grab a super ticket, do not wait. Those are going really fast. And the early bird window ends in about 4 weeks. So you have time for the early bird tickets. But if you want to get a super ticket, I'm not making any promises. I'm just saying there's only 7 left. So you can find out more about the Novel Marketing Conference at novelmarketingconference.com. This is a conference that's focused on helping you sell more books. It's not about how to get published. But if you go to this conference and learn how to build a platform, it will make you more appealing to a publisher or give you more confidence as you market and promote your own books. It's a very unique conference. This is our 3rd year doing it. We had rave reviews in the previous years, and we would love to see you there.
Jaina, that's a great question. Do we have any numbers on whether audiobook listeners prefer AI or human narrators? We do. So readers do prefer human narrators, but they prefer AI narrators over nothing.
And a voice clone of your voice, which you can do with 11 Labs. So when people think AI narrators, they're thinking Siri. Often when you do a survey. 11 Labs is a huge step up from Siri because it can be your voice reading your book with your emotional coaching. And the other thing you can do with 11 Labs is you can have every character have his own voice or her own voice. And so suddenly it becomes something more and
now you have
kind
a cast.
of different. Right. You have a fully cast film or audio film for people to listen to. Now, the more work you put into an 11 Labs style audiobook, the less it's cheaper. Right? Oh, I did this full cast and I had emotional direction and stage direction for every single thing they did. It doesn't necessarily make it less. It's still less money, but it could be quite a bit of work to do that.
So I just watched a Daniel Green video yesterday, which I really recommend, especially if you guys write fantasy or sci-fi. You guys should follow his channel on YouTube because he has a lot of good news. He showed some statistics yesterday as to what readers actually don't know if they're listening to AI or real voice actors anymore. And they had some audiobooks rated, and the AI audiobook won.
Also, there's a lot of young people on TikTok, and a lot of the audio on TikTok is AI generated.
Yeah.
Right? There's the TikTok lady and the TikTok guy, and people get very used to those voices. So people are being desensitized. There's also some talk that YouTube is actually using AI upscaling on regular videos in the shorts just to customize people to seeing AI images of people that they know to desensitize them.
That's some CIA stuff right there.
I wouldn't be surprised if TikTok and Instagram got on that game as well. So Americans are being rapidly desensitized to AI, just like they were rapidly desensitized to cameras on phones. Like if you
So
remember, when phones first started having cameras, there was this big moral panic over phones in bathrooms, and everyone was like terrified of phones having cameras on them, and we got over it. We were made desensitized to that fear.
So again, the end result of this is the same thing I've been saying for months regarding this kind of panic is just be a storyteller. Use the gift of storytelling and tell your story. And there are people who will prefer that. There are people who are going to go for, AI generated stuff, whether you want to call it garbage or not. It's just going to become a preference kind of thing. You stay true to what you're going to do. If you're just putting out a bunch of books and you can't afford human narrators for them, make use of the tools that are available to you. Okay? There's no moral stance to be had here.
It will never be as good as working with a celebrity narrator.
Absolutely.
A celebrity narrator who has their own fan base from a straight up quality, but also from a marketing angle. But that is also expensive.
Right. Are you a bad person because you can't get Morgan Freeman to narrate your audiobook? It doesn't make any sense. Okay. It's just a matter of the resources that are available to you.
Now, if you get him to narrate your audiobook, that might make you a good person, but not being able to afford him doesn't make you a bad person. I think he read the Bible.
There's another quick question from Ronald. Do audio files require an ISBN? Yes, they do. If it's another edition of your book, you need a new ISBN for your book.
And I encourage you, if you're asking that question, to listen to my episode on metadata, because this isn't actually a burden, it's an opportunity, and it can be really useful for marketing purposes. And it's a free episode on metadata, and I recommend it a lot because it's very useful to know about. Speaking of metadata, reputation thieves strike again. Jonathan, what's this story?
So on August 14th in 2025, Eric Topol, a prominent physician/scientist, I don't know why those are two separate things because I thought a physician, whatever, publicly alerted X and LinkedIn about fraudulent books on Amazon using his identity. These included fake memoirs and cookbooks themed around longevity, which would echo his legitimate work in his book Super Agers. Despite these infringement reports, the listings persist, which are kind of showing that there's an issue with content moderation. This confuses buyers and it dilutes trust in a guy's brand. So like Topple's brand, people are looking at it as like, is it really you? Is it really you? This has happened with a bunch of other people too, especially celebrities. If people think they're going to make money off of your name, to where it's like chaff. They're just shooting a bunch of stuff to cloud the air and confuse. This is a great, unethical, but great tactic to use against a competitor if you want to dilute their brand so that your brand can become sharper and more defined.
It's not worth it for that purpose, even if you have no ethics.
Yeah, it's immoral, and when people find out, you're done.
Yeah. So we have a whole episode on this. I actually coined a term for this kind of fraud because we didn't have a term for it yet, and I'm really hoping it will take off. And it's reputation theft, because it's not actually illegal, right? Creating a pen name that's a Jana Bass and writing a book on editing books, that seems like her. There's nothing technically illegal about it, but that is an effort to steal her reputation or to steal Eric's reputation. And so we have a whole episode on how to protect from this sort of thing. My advice for him would be to get a trademark on the phrase super agers. So that's his term that kind of brands his book and his other books. And he can't trademark his own name because I'm not the only Thomas Umstattd in the world, right? It's a very unusual name. There's two other Thomas Umstatts that I know of, right? So it'd be unfair to them if I trademarked my name. But you, at least not easily trademark your name. But you can trademark phrases. So you have to be very careful with that, though, because if the phrase is overly broad or if other people are also using that phrase, which is very common in fiction, for instance, the whole world will turn on you. We've seen this several times in the romance world where some romance author tried to trademark some phrase. Yeah. And all the other romance authors turned on her. It's safer in nonfiction, though, I will say. So you'll have a lot of brands like 7 Habits. I believe that phrase is a trademarked phrase. And the Stephen Covey company has used 7 Habits to create a whole economies worth of related products, right? This is the 7 Habits journal, 7 Habits for your teen, 7 Habits for married couples, right? Whatever. It's so you can do that sort of thing. Trademarks are expensive. You do have to defend them. I'm not a lawyer. But in my episode on reputation theft, I do interview a lawyer and we talk about other ways that you can fight this. But the fastest, cheapest way is to do exactly what Eric is doing, which is whine about it publicly and hope that the outcry causes Amazon to take these books down, which
Right.
does work in some
I mean,
instances.
I've always said, I mean, if you really want help in Walmart, go in the middle of the aisle and start screaming. Someone will come to help you. All right, so a bit of fun news. Word of the day, doom prompting. Okay, and I'm having a lot of fun with this. Doom prompting, which is kind of the idea of doom scrolling, is the idea of mindlessly or addictively conversing with a chatbot. So you're sitting on the couch and you're like, ChatGPT, do you like me? or, okay. And so I actually that was the little bit of news or whatever. But I actually have a question, and Thomas disagrees with me on this, so I'm looking forward to this. Is being antisocial a defense against this kind of behavior? And so let me tell you why I think that. When I use ChatGPT, I ask it a question. I might type please. Okay, I don't see this as a person. I'm not anthropomorphizing it. I don't think Skynet is going to come after me because I was rude. I just don't function that way. That's not my personality. So I will type in my question, I'll get my answer, and then I leave the ChatGPT window to go do the thing that I asked it the question for. Okay, I don't say thank you. I don't say goodbye. There's no emotional trigger in me at all whatsoever for talking to a robot. Okay, but I'm also antisocial. I do this in gaming. Okay, if you're a problem on the team, and Thomas has had to call me out a couple times when we play together because we'll get a rando on the team. I'll be like, dude, why are you being stupid? Stop being stupid, okay? Because I'm there for a result, right? You know, I want to win the game, and I'm not there to make friends. So that's just maybe how my personality is. So I am not affected by this doom prompting thing. I don't want a relationship with AI. I don't want a relationship with anyone. So Thomas, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I disagree. I think that you're just a jerk, and that's why
Yes.
you're not nice, which is
that's fine.
Different than being antisocial. So I actually see being very social, having very positive, healthy relationships in your life. The more satisfied you are with real human interaction, the less desperate you are for an artificial alternative, right? If you've just eaten a good meal, you're not tempted by McDonald's. But if you're starving and there's nothing else open, suddenly you're tempted by McDonald's. And so,
Sure.
Jonathan, you may be a jerk, but you're a happily married jerk, and you have a good community with your church, and you
my
have a
wife
good
is so
relationship
nice.
with your family, right? So you're not actually, like, socially, you're actually in a pretty good place, and you're not vulnerable for the AI to kind of slot into some empty friendship slot in your life, or you're less vulnerable for that. But somebody who has no friends, doesn't get out, doesn't go to church, isn't married, and they can chat with an AI that promises to be all of their dreams, right, and fulfilled. That's very dangerous, and it can create a spiral that's very mentally unhealthy. And it's one of the reasons why I'm part of the reason why I'm building the toolbox, because I think that a chat interface is actually not a good interface for using these powerful tools, because it can lead to that, right? Like, I don't want AI Thomas to be your friend, partly because I would bankrupt me.
Thomas, do you like me? Do you like my book?
Like, I see how people use AI Thomas, and it's exactly how I want them to use it, right? They have a marketing question, they ask AI Thomas, it gives them the answer. If they don't understand, they'll ask for clarification. They go back and forth a few times, then they're done, right? I don't want them going round and round and round, like getting affirmations, and then, like, and it would be weird. Don't flirt with AI Thomas.
Make him
We went
read
in a
it.
very
Do
strange
it.
place here. So I think being very social is actually a protection against this sort of doom prompting, but I am starting to see this as a problem more and more in society as people are opting for these AI companions. Speaking of AI tools, I have a new AI tool that I've built called Not a Copy Editor, and I'll have a whole episode coming up on this on novel marketing in a few days. But this is a companion to my AI tool called Not a Developmental Editor. So Not a Developmental Editor will give you developmental feedback on your book. Not a Copy Editor, you select what English you speak, so British or Canadian or American. Then you pick your style book that you want it to follow. So Chicago Manual of Style or the Oxford Manual of Style. And then it will give you a copy edit of a chapter of your book following that style guide. And everything is presented as a suggestion that you can either incorporate or not, which is a much better interface for protecting your voice than, say, Grammarly or Pro Writing Aid's little red squigglies. It's a little bit more friction, but that friction forces you to make a judgment call on each edit, which I think is actually beneficial in the long run. I break down this more in an upcoming episode, but I do encourage you to, if you're already a patron, give it a shot. Let me know what you think. With all of these tools, I'm constantly improving them based off of patron feedback.
Stepping out of AI news for a second, into book industry, HarperCollins has reversed its decision to outsource its book fulfillment. So before they were using warehouses and stuff from outside of the United States. Now they're going to operate their own large-scale warehouse in the United States for the first time in 15 years. They're considered one of the big five in the industry. They revealed they'll construct a state-of-the-art 1.6 million square foot logistics facility in Brownsburg, Indiana, at a cost of $160 million. They're trying to use. It looks like they're trying to bypass tariffs and any potential international fees or expenses that would be associated with shipping books to the United States or out of the United States or whatever it is. So the idea here, this is a good thing because now they're operating within the United States. And that's going to lower costs for American authors shipping to American readers, because and it affects the whole industry because now the competition has gotten cheaper. They can lower their prices more, which means everyone has to lower their prices.
Well, they were already operating in the United States, but they were outsourcing their fulfillment to a third party, which was likely Ingram. And this is what a lot of the big publishers did, was that they stopped actually doing the work of a publisher. So like they'd outsource their printing to a printer, they'd outsource the fulfillment to a fulfillment company, and they would bring in freelance editors and freelance cover designers. And after a while, you're like, what even are you at this point? Like you have to have something that you do as a company other than
you're
just
a broker at that
cashing
point,
checks,
you know?
right? And I think that this will give them good competitive advantage. I think that it's important to have a good answer to the question, what do you do? Like, why should I work with you? Because fulfillment and distribution is more than just taking the box and putting it, or taking the book and putting it in a box. Good fulfillment and distribution is also the relationships with the various retail channels. And you're in a better position to interface with those retail channels if you have a relationship with them directly, rather than going through an intermediary like Ingram. And potentially this will free up capacity with Ingram to start working more with indies. Because as an indie author, you can't spend $160 million to build a fulfillment facility, but you can outsource to Ingram if you want their help.
I don't know. I think they're going to fight hard to keep their traditional stuff. We'll see. That's the majority of their money. A real quick reminder, like and subscribe to the Author Update channel if you're enjoying the content that we're putting out. And even if you're not enjoying it, give us a hate like. People hate watch. Just give us a hate like.
Also, if you ring the bell, you'll be notified when we go live. So if you're seeing the live chat and you want to be a part of the live chat, there's even more excitement in the live chat than what we throw on screen. That could be you if you came live. And the easiest way to know when we go live is to turn on notifications.
Thomas doesn't let me answer in the chat anymore.
There was that incident that we don't talk about, Jonathan.
My First Amendment rights were taken away. Google Gemini launches storybook mode. So they've added a storybook feature inside the Gemini app, which turns a short prompt and potentially some photos into a 10-page illustrated read-aloud storybook. So it's available wherever Gemini runs. It has print and share options and support for 45+ languages. It's probably not a good idea to get your children's book from this. I'm just gonna say it.
I was playing with
what it is good for is brainstorming.
Yeah, I was playing with this earlier today because there's a children's book I've been wanting to write about a car bed. Where a little boy is moving to a big kid bed, and so his dad orders a car bed, and a race car bed. And so he builds it, and he's watching his dad build the car bed, but then he gets bigger and bigger, and he doesn't fit in the car bed anymore. So it goes to his little brother, and then his little brother gets too big for it. And so they sell it to another family, and then another little boy. And so it's actually a story of the car bed as it goes from family to family and get more and more run down as each little boy loves this car bed. Inspired by perhaps a real car bed that moved its way through our family, a race car bed. And I was like, let's just see what it does. And so I prompted the AI. I kind of gave it a pitch for the story like I just gave you. And I gave it a sense of what artistic style I wanted it to do. And I was very impressed with the continuity of the images. So the little boy on page 1 was the same little boy on page 3, which has historically been a real challenge for AI. The illustrations were still soulless, and its writing was not great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where this is really interesting is you can prompt it with prompts like create a children's book for a 5-year-old that explains what daddy does. He works as a nuclear researcher for the University of Colorado. And so that kind of prompt, which is laser focused, right? It's just for one child, that for the dad to explain what he does. Although this can lead to existential dread as like you hear your job explained in really simple language and you're like, is that really all I do? That is really all I do. I just sit in meetings and review TPS reports.
Staring at dead trees.
I just sit in meetings and review TPS reports. What am I doing in my life? Y'all can tell I'm coming up on my midlife crisis. I'm about to turn 40. Anyway, so the illustrations were still a little soulless. They were still kind of AI. This is Gemini, which is behind GPT in terms of image creation. But for rapid brainstorming, I think this is actually a really cool tool because you can just prompt it and it gives you a 10-page children's book, 2 minutes later. It's still really buggy. I was getting some errors when I was trying to use it today, but this is an indication of where things are headed. And one of the places where things are headed are micro-targeted books where your children and your grandchildren have more books with their names in the book because you printed a version of the book that had their specific name in it. And that's going to become technologically a lot easier and also customized in other ways for them specifically.
I also see some ways where you can use this, like for my brand, it would work great because, I tend to be affectionately abusive to my readers. So I'll send out memes or whatever. This would be great for like my Marines. If I'm like doing some promos for Semper Die or something, and I would be like, this is how you do math for Marines. And there's like a 10-page children's book on how to do it. That would be huge for my audience. They love that kind of thing.
I love that actually.
That's their jam.
Yeah, children's books for adults that are humorous and kind of tongue-in-cheek. There's a whole world, and it doesn't make sense to publish that children's book for adults, although there've been a few that have been absolute smash hits. But as like a joke or a reader magnet or a fun reward in an email newsletter, I can see it being really fun.
Like, to my personality, it'd be like, somebody made a horrible mistake, they cheated on their husband or something like that. And you're just like, here's a children's book of all the mistakes that you made. And you send it to them. That would be hilarious. Probably not a good author marketing technique. I think that's hysterical. Anyway.
Moving on.
Speaking of jerks, okay, and Worldcon just happened, okay? That was this 2 weekends ago, I think. Past weekend. And George R.R. Martin was in attendance, along with Brandon Sanderson and Matt Dinniman, and there was a panel where people got to ask them questions. And this fan got up there and asked the weirdest question. It was just so antisocial. Asked George R.R. Martin, you're getting old and you're gonna die soon. When are you going to hand off the completion of the Game of Thrones series to another author? And Brandon Sanderson sitting right next to him, who finished Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series. So Brandon Sanderson says, look, I'm not doing it. No, not me. Okay.
It really shouldn't be him. He would do a terrible job.
Oh yeah, it would be awful. Okay. Because it's totally different outlooks and everything like that. But what happened was George got up and left and he went to go sign books and they just ended the panel because it was so just not good. It was so awkward and no one could get over it. But it does bring out a legitimate question, right? Okay, and I'm a jerk, okay? So I'm just going to treat things what level of responsibility do authors have to their fans to complete their series? If at a certain point fans have invested so much time, money, I mean, you've got a show,
Identity,
identity, okay, cosplaying, okay, you've invested so
tattoos.
much in this series, and the author just isn't finishing it. At what point is the author? Should the author be called out like this? Okay, because this is, while we can make fun of this fan, on the other hand, most of the fans feel this way. Like this is a symptom. It's not a it's not like a isolated incident. It's only isolated because George R. R. Martin is rarely at events where people can ask him questions.
Rarity is going up, I will say.
Yeah, I wonder why.
I'm not going to want to go to
So
Marcy.
here, that's my first of all, as a human being, no one should treat another human being like that, right? But George R. R. Martin doesn't count as just a human being anymore because of the cultural impact that he's had. And I am of the opinion, and people can argue with me about this wrongly, that at a certain point, when you have a certain threshold of cultural impact, you actually do have a responsibility to behave well for your audience. Like Roy Rogers, for instance, when he was an actor, he actually made sure his personal life was good for his audience, which were boys. They were boys who wanted to be like Roy Rogers. And I am of the opinion there's a responsibility that comes along with having that kind of impact.
Seem we should be good examples and role models for impressionable young people. I don't think George R. R. Martin sees himself as a role model for impressionable young people. So this,
but is he like George Lucas had the same issue, right? Well, not the exact same problem, but the same issue, to where people didn't like the prequels because they took the previously created material that he licensed and made money off of and tossed it out.
No, not for the prequels.
No. Don't argue with me on this. I know my stuff. Okay. So like Boba Fett's history was totally different in the extended universe. Then the prequels came out and he tossed it out. And there was a lot of upset over that. And then the sequels came out and everyone liked the prequels way more at that point.
Yeah, the prequels are horrendously underrated in my opinion. But there's another angle here that I think is important to talk about. Many years ago, I visited Austria with my wife, and we went to Salzburg, which is where Sound of Music is filmed. And we visited the graveyard in Salzburg that inspired the graveyard that they filmed, where the Nazis are searching for the family and they're like hiding behind the gravestones at the end of Sound of Music.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out that they didn't film in the actual graveyard because they couldn't get permission to like set up camera equipment on top of people's dead bodies. So I'm like, okay, that makes sense.
Feels disrespectful.
Yeah. So the actual one is like on the side of a hill. It's very hilly. The one in the film is very flat. It's in a soundstage, but they actually copied it pretty closely. So as we're walking around this graveyard, I was struck by how many skeletons there were on tombstones and in statues, and like skeletons with their fingers pointing right at you, because this is a medieval graveyard. And often underneath the skeleton would be a Latin phrase, and it was memento mori. Remember that you are mortal. And I've thought about that ever since, because our ancestors had this desire to be reminded of their mortality to encourage them to live a more virtuous life.
Right.
And the modern view, or the current day view, really rejects that, right? If you're around an old person, you don't mention that they're going to die soon. That's offensive. Whereas their ancestors would have seen that as very important, actually. If you're old, you need to be reminded that you're going to die soon. And if you're young, you need to be reminded that you're going to die soon. And so I actually disagree that the problem with this was him telling George R. R. Martin that he's going to die soon, because that actually could have been like an act of grace, like a kindness to somebody who's been in denial. He's like, I'm going to live forever. It's like, no, you're not.
Now, if you hold up a billboard with a clock on it that's like tick, 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 going down.
It's the ultimate statistic that 10 out of 10 people die. And lying to ourselves about this statistic doesn't do us any favors, and it doesn't do our readers any favors. And so having a plan, one, living a virtuous life and thinking in terms of eternity and giving an answer on the day of judgment for the deeds done in the body, whether they be good or evil. It's good strategy. Highly recommend. But also thinking in terms of your legacy and your readership, right? If you leave a series incomplete, then that series' longevity is dramatically diminished. Future generations aren't going to be nearly as interested in an incomplete series as the first generation was in a series they thought would become complete. And so having a succession plan, like having an outline, having a successor, right? Like a fellow author, and you have, in writing that they have the rights to finish your story and they have an outline so that if you die, they can make an effort at it, or, explaining to your spouse. Like, I think that the Wheel of Time books were really saved by Brandon Sanderson.
Yeah.
One, I think he was a better writer, and so it gave them a really solid ending. But also, it ended, right? That series is too long to just stop.
Yeah.
That series would have died.
Again, you're looking at investment, right?
Yeah.
And people, if it's not ever going to end, people aren't going to invest in it, or they're going to be angry. And that anger transfers all the way around. There are people not starting my fantasy series because George R. R. Martin hasn't finished his, because Patrick Rothfuss hasn't finished his.
Yeah.
And they're just been burned. They're like, I'm not starting it with anyone then. It's like, I didn't do that. Like, that's not me. I'm just in the middle of writing. And it doesn't matter.
And also think of your heirs. So say what you will about the Wheel of Times TV show. And I have many things I could say, but none of it is positive. But I will say this as a positive thing. Harriet, which was his wife, I'm blanking on the name of the guy who wrote the Wheel of Time books.
Robert Jordan.
Robert Jordan's wife, Harriet, has been comforted in her widowhood by the Amazon money and by the Brandon Sanderson money.
Yes.
Right? Like, Robert Jordan left his wife in a comfortable way because he had a plan for the ending of the series. And because Harriet felt that she had permission to hand it off, because she had been very involved in the writing of the books. I think she was an editor for some of them. He had an assistant as well. And that was really solid, because otherwise sales would have cratered because there was no completion of the books. And he probably made him enough money and he probably invested it well where she would have been comfortable either way, but maybe not, right? We don't know people's financial
But this is just good
situation.
behavior, right? You're thinking of your family, you're thinking of your legacy, your children. And there's actually a toxic thing right now, which is, I'm not leaving my children anything. They can make their own way in the world. And that's just wrong. I mean, you want to give your children every advantage that they can have, because the world's hard. The world sucks. And the world's trying everything it can to take what you had away. So there's no reason to just let your kids get beat down. So just having this forward-looking and unafraid of death. Okay, you should be handling that on your own. I have recommendations if you want to DM me. You should be unafraid of death and planning for your legacy beyond it, for your heritage, for those that are going to come after you. And honestly, this is something that I think George R. R. Martin has failed at. And, I don't have the kind of relationship with him where I would say that to his face. Okay, but if he asks me, let's say he's watching this show for some reason, if he wants to come after me about it, sure. I'll be like, look, hey, you've done an incredible thing by writing a series that has just, upended American culture for a while. I mean, Game of Thrones is huge. And good on you for that. I mean, you did incredible world building and stuff. I got some issues with morality and in particular descriptions of women, but you've had an effect, you've had an impact, and you're really falling down on the fact that you're not finishing it. And I understand it's a huge deal. When you've had that kind of impact, how do you wrap it up? Like, how do you resolve it?
I would, if I were George R. R. Martin and we're experiencing the kind of fear that he's feeling, there is a way to preserve your legacy while still avoiding the inevitable blowback, because his worldview ends in nihilism, which is not going to leave people happy at the end of his story. It's part of the reason why he doesn't want to finish his stories, is that his worldview is very bankrupt, morally, but also ideologically. But he could still finish and write the last book and say, it's in my will, 10 days after I die, my publishers have the right. That way he can still fulfill his promise to his readers.
Sure.
without having to hear all of the pushback.
And
There's
that book
ways
would
to
sell
solve
so
this
many
problem.
copies. You know,
But
it
I
won't
don't
release
think he
until
has-
I die. But then people are going to shoot him. So I mean, that's not as good.
Yeah, I don't think he has any children. People without children tend to not have as like a view of terms
Right.
of like future generations. They don't think of themselves as a potential ancestor.
Right.
And you know, there's a selfishness that's particular in his generation, where baby boomers got all of these blessings from the generations above them, but they don't want to have kids or share those blessings with the generations below them. It's not universal to baby boomers, but it's particularly acute with baby boomers, which is very interesting. Now that we've offended half of our audience and gone overtime.
We're winning.
If you want to have grandchildren, I will give you a pro tip, and that is sell your house, move into a smaller house, and help your children buy a house. Amazingly effective at encouraging the generation of grandchildren.
Holyoke, don't you do it, man. Don't you do it. You're doing it. No. No, no, no. No. No.
People are playing bingo, and they needed a final square. I'll give it to you. Zeitgeist. With that, we'll be back next week. If you're a patron, we're moving over to Crowdcast for the patrons only exclusive Q&A. Crowdcast is having some technical issues. Hopefully they've gotten those sorted out. I haven't checked to see. Looks like Crowdcast is still having technical issues. So
Oh no.
it may not go. Looks like the part of the internet is down, and Crowdcast has been pulled into a
Discord.
bigger outage. But anyway, if it's working, come see me over there. And if not, we'll see you next week for the next author update. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and live long and prosper.